Hey, I'm going to show you how to use this properly the first time and every time you pull the trigger in 3 simple steps. I'm not kidding. Hey, welcome to my world. This is my paint booth. I'm going to give you a paint lesson today. I've spent more time in paint booths in my life than I can probably even remember or recall, but it's a place that I love. It's a zone that I'm so comfortable in. And what I've figured out over the years is that my calling is to help people feel this way, feel confident in here, confident that you can get good results every single time. So that's what I'm doing. Thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing, ringing the bells, all that type of stuff, and we're gonna get right into this. So, spraying paint, people think that it's an art. People think that it's a magical thing that happens, and it's absolutely not. It's procedure and technique. Both of those are learned. You don't come out of the womb learning how to, or knowing how to spray paint. You learn it along the way. And so many people have trouble because they haven't either been taught properly or they have gotten part of the way and they shut it down and they're assuming and guessing. There's no crying in baseball. There's no guessing in painting. So we're going to show you, I'm not kidding about the 3 simple steps. I'm going to show you how to look at your paint gun, how to set it up properly in 3 steps to where you get the best results from the way that equipment was designed right away. And then you can work on technique, and that's really where it comes from. So we're going to be using spray guns like this. This is well, the industry term is kind of interesting. It's called a gravity feed gun because the cup is up here and the paint runs down through this fluid chamber and the air comes up here, mixes with the fluid and gets shot out the end, right? You pull the trigger, a spray mist comes out. So people call this a gravity fed gun, but the technical aspect of it is still a siphon feed. And I'm going to show you what that means. So we pull the trigger, mist comes out of it. This is a bag liner here. Watch what happens. So that's just air. Look at that bag in there. Get a close-up of that camera guy. You see that bag being sucked up in there? If this was purely a gravity-fed gun, it wouldn't be sucking that bag up in place. So there is some siphon, there is some suction, there is some vacuum in there. So gravity fed, no. We're going to call this a top fed gun. I know, minutia detail doesn't matter, but it's the nuance that matters. So the spray gun itself is a very simple device. However, spray gun design has changed over the years from a canister style siphon fed gun to these top feed guns that are industry standard now. There is over 100 years of development into this piece of gear. It's not a new piece of equipment. Paint guns have been under improvement and under development for 104 years, I think, is actually the literal stat, since the first paint gun was brought into commerce. So they've had a lot of time to make this a really good piece of gear. These are name brand guns. I use SATA spray equipment. For me, I want a good quality piece of equipment. That's why I use SATA. So anyway, I'm not going to beat anybody up for using economy guns. You got to get the best gun you can afford at the time that you're doing the job. So we have these guns. Let's talk about this gun. So here, spoiler alert, preface, whatever you want to call it. I'm in my booth. I don't have safety gear on. We're going to talk about a couple of different things that I'm wearing. The safety gear that I have on now are gloves. I don't even have safety glasses on, which that's going to change here in just a little bit. But I've got tap water, and the paint we're going to use is this stuff. Get a close-up of that. This comes from Hobby Lobby, right? Get a close-up of the price of that. This is craft paint. It's water-based craft paint. It's really inexpensive. When I do my in-person classes, I actually use this. When I do my demos on my online training courses, Paintucation University 101, I use this product. When I do live seminars, I use cheap craft paint. There's a couple of different reasons. It's really inexpensive. This is $4 for this, and it makes about 2 quarts when I add water to it and mix it to about the viscosity of paint. So it becomes a almost free training tool. It's black. We've got white paper or light tan cardboard. Now we have contrast. We can see exactly what's happening. So take this home with you. Use these things at home to practice with. I'm giving you tools here. I'm giving you tools to build your skills on. I'm giving you the foundation of how to get excellent spray technique. And the way we do it is by practice, baby. Get used to that. I'm going to show you a bunch of things here, and you can't just watch this and go, okay, now I know how to paint. It doesn't work like that. Nothing works like that. You have to take what I'm going to talk to you about and tell you about and put it into application and do the work. It's just how it is. You got to do the work. You got to develop the muscle memory. You got to develop the repetition so that you don't have to think about it anymore. That said, we're using tap water, we're using craft paint, and I am going to be using some PPE. I've got gloves on. I've got a half mask, charcoal respirator, and somewhere in this trailer park, I've got a pair of safety glasses that are going to magically appear on my face because I forgot them and they're outside on a bench. But first things first, we're going to talk about the spray gun. We're going to do a spray exercise on here, and then we're going to do crawl, walk, run. Once we know how to spray, where to start, where to stop, now we're going to talk about a three-dimensional panel. So that's going to be the way this is going to go. I'm going to show you what the gun does. I'm going to show you how to hold it. I'm going to show you how to spray it. I'm going to show you how to use it. I'm going to show you how to paint an actual panel. The rest is up to you in your practice. So let's talk about the controls on the spray gun. Actually, hang on just a second. I'll be right back. Hold that thought. I got him. So, not every gun has this gauge on the back of it, but look at that. This tells you your pressure. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but for now, let's do 25 PSI, right? Oh, can you see that? Yeah, I think you can. Yeah, so that's 25 PSI. When we pull the trigger of a spray gun, 2 things happen. We let air in, and it's letting all the air that's coming into the bottom of it and kicking it out there. You're going to feel a notch in your spray gun. It's almost a resistance. And then when you go past that resistance, now you're letting fluid come down into the fluid passage and out the end of the gun. So, air and fluid, right? Pretty straightforward. Here's why this is important. When you're setting the pressure of your gun, you don't want to set it like this, because look at that PSI at the gun inlet. So it says 64 pounds. That's the pressure that's built up on that internal gauge. When I pull the trigger, now it's set at 26 pounds. When you test your air pressure, when you set your air pressure for spraying, set it with air moving through the gun. You don't have to blast paint through it. You don't have to waste paint like that. But always make sure there's air moving through your gun when you set your PSI for the different applications of the different materials that you're going to be spraying. So that's kind of step 1. So on average, we're between 20 and 30 PSI. I've got it at 26 just because it's average. So a couple of different things happen when you pull the trigger. Can you see water coming out? Okay, yeah, okay, I like that. That's, oh wow, we can really see that. Oh man, that's a great demo. So, what we've got are controls here. We've got our air control right here. Now this is a gauge that's an attachment, it's an accessory, but here's your air control. Different spray guns, some of them may have an air control down here at the base of the gun. Soda guns typically have the air control right here at the back of the handle. Now you have a fan control. This is your fan control. So what does that control? See that? That's a cone. That's a round pattern. That's a flat pattern. SATA actually names this the flat round control, not a fan control, because it's not really controlling anything. It's kind of an on-off switch, right? So there, back up a little, camera guy. There you go. There is full fan, full width of the fan. Watch as I turn this dial in. It doesn't change very much until right there, the very end of it. That's a very, very aggressive change right there. So, and that's right at the end of the adjustment. So there's a clue right there. But anyway, so there's your fan control. So we've got it turned all the way open, which on this gun is all the way to the left. Now we have our fluid control. Right here, this guy. So I'm going to crank this thing all the way in. And I'm going to starve off any fluid, even, I'm going to starve off any, well, wow, I turned the air down. All right, so that's full trigger pull. I can't pull this trigger anymore, and this thing is choked off big time. So here, with every bit of turn, revolution on this control, I'm allowing more fluid to come in here and meet the already existing airstream. It's pushing air out, right? You can hear it. Now we're allowing fluid to come down in here and blend with the air. So what does that sound like? It's a carburetor. It's a paint carburetor, right? So as I allow more fluid in, look what happens to the fan. You can see more and more fluid in there. This is a literal demonstration of, okay, so that's wide open, baby. Look what's happening there. You can see exactly what happens with full fluid delivery. So just for the sake of the argument, I'm going to lock this in at full fluid delivery. We have our fan set at full wide open fan. We have our fluid set at full fluid delivery. So I talked about 3 steps on how to set your paint gun up. In 3 steps to get the best result from the equipment using the simplest way to get there. Step 1, set your inlet pressure. Step 2, widen your fan pattern to full. Step 3, I adjust my fluid with the fluid adjustment knob until I can feel it bump into my finger. See how it's moving my finger? Get a close-up shot of that, camera guy. You can see my finger move. I've got pressure against it. As soon as I can feel that adjustment knob bump my finger, I turn the lock knob and lock it in. Step 1, set your inlet pressure. Step 2, set your fan to full fan. Step 3, set your fluid to full fluid. You're done, buddy. You're done. Now there's a bunch of painters that are going to throw rocks at the screen right now because their recipe is a 1/4 turn in on the fan and 2.5 turns back and then a 1/4 turn to the right. Lift your left leg, pass some gas, do an arm fart, and do another 1/3 of a turn in, and that's the perfect setup. I'm here to tell you that the perfect setup is full fan, full fluid, correct PSI at the inlet. That's it. Don't overthink this, guys. And you veterans out there that have your own recipe, good for you. You know what works, but you also know you had to start somewhere. So what I'm telling you is where to start. This design is 100+ years old. It's a very, very sophisticated piece of engineering that people have worked on and constantly revised every few years. Engineers have been paid billions of dollars to perfect this piece of equipment. It is designed to be used full fan, full fluid, correct PSI, period. So that said, are there times to when I adjust the fan? Sure. Are there times where I adjust my fluid flow? Sure. It's very rare. When I'm training somebody, never. Typically when I'm spraying a paint job, never. It's very rare that I mess around with these controls. So that's my best advice to you. And you paint guys out there that are going to tell me that I'm full of it and that, you know, I'm just oversimplifying the process. No, there's beauty in simplification. So what I want you to do is set it like that. Now we work on what's important. Holding the gun the right distance from the panel, proper overlap, proper offset, better technique, perpendicular to the panel, 90 degrees, using the equipment properly, developing the muscle memory. That's the important thing. Set your gun to where it does what it's designed to do and forget it. Now we focus on muscle memory, we focus on technique, right? Okay, so that's where we're at. Speaking of, I'm going to tell you about my training courses all the way through this video. The links are in the description. Paintucation Learning Center is online, paintucation.com. It's been there for 25 years. And I've got a lot of training videos on there, stuff like this right here, the fundamentals, the basics of the basics. And I've also got, this is a spray training device. It's called the Spray Coach. Basically what it is training wheels for a spray gun. You can see the little icon here. It's the Paintucation Spray Coach. It's training wheels for a spray gun. This system, which is a system, we have a video, a DVD, a lock ring, and it looks like a coat hanger, but basically it's a spray pattern simulator. This is a kit. The video shows you how to use the kit, how to develop muscle memory, how to learn how to paint without spraying a drop. This is something that I've developed over the years, and I worked on it with the Eastwood Company actually when I was still working with them as a brand ambassador and a spokesperson. We came up with this because when I used to do live seminars at car shows, I would tape a paintbrush to the end of the spray gun to hold it a certain distance off the surface, because it's super important to learn that. If you're interested in a spray training device, talk to me about a Spray Coach, man. It's a really interesting thing. And like any of this, the really good painters will always tell you that in the first place, we're never done learning. There's always something to learn from somebody else and their technique. And in the second place, sometimes we need a refresher. Sometimes we need a reminder of what perfect spray technique feels like in your hand and in your body. And that's what the Spray Coach is for. So if you're interested in that, check it out. It's available from paintucation.com. So now that we know what the spray gun does, we pull the trigger, paint comes out. It's set perfectly. And guess what? Look at this. Look at that spray pattern. It looks pretty dang good. So let's talk about what happens within that spray pattern. If I run out of water, I'll have to go and fill it up again. It doesn't matter. So there's air, right? I'm pulling, I'm metering paint in. Let's take a look. What happens here? As I'm drawing my finger out here, what you're seeing are the droplets of paint that are atomized. Atomization means that it's put into a particulate that intermixes with air and becomes a fine mist, just like fuel into a fuel injector or fuel into a carburetor. It's atomization, and it allows the fuel to be burnable or more burnable and combustible and squeezable and make power in the engine. So the atomization here in the spray gun puts the droplets in the correct spacing as they come out, in the correct orientation with the fan pattern, in a way that they can be applied very consistently. Consistency is the key. Look at this. As we're looking here, I'm going to stop my finger. What do you see where the tip of my finger is? And you can answer the screen, but I'm going to tell you what I see. I see it start to be inconsistent right about here. And way out here, it's the Wild West, man. Those droplets, they're all over the place. They're combining with each other. They're random. And so what happens when the droplets combine with each other, they become larger. They become big, fat droplets. And there's airspace in between them. Remember that, it's important. When we start with the craft paint, I want to talk about the airspace in between the droplets. But what I showed you was what I call the sweet spot. And I'm going to show it again. Right here, that's the sweet spot. That's where you're going to get your best and most consistent atomization. That's where your gun needs to be off the panel. How far is that, Kevin? How far off the panel? between 4 and 6 inches. That's it. Cool. So here's one for you. This one's for free. How do you know what 4 inches is? How do I know what 6 inches is? Do I bring a freaking ruler into my paint booth and measure it off? Do I have a depth? No. Anybody's hand, except for maybe Andre the Giant, anybody's hand, you've got an automatic measurement in your hand. Here it is, right? There's my fist. 4 inches wide. Put your thumb out, 6 inches. Put your pinky out, there's 8 inches. 4, 6, 8. There's your quick reference. You're welcome. So the way you do that is if you're unsure, or if you're trying to practice and you want to be 4 inches off the panel, or if you want to try the difference between 4 inches and 6 inches off the panel, there you go. Bam. What does my gun look like? There. 4 inches off the panel. Oh, no. That result didn't work for me. I'm going to go 6 inches off the panel. Bam. There I am, 6 inches. It's a quick reference, right? 4, 6, 8. Bam. I don't even have to look. I know I'm 4 inches off the panel. I can feel that now, and I can track 4 inches off the panel. I'm getting dizzy doing this because I'm not looking at what I'm doing. No, you know my point, right? So 4, 6, 8. That's how we know how far off the panel that we need to be. So most of your materials these days, 4 to 6 inches, that's pretty good. Back in the day when I was using siphon-fed guns at 75 PSI to get nice metallic distribution, it was 10 to 12 inches off the panel. The times they are a-changin'. Bob Dylan is not wrong. This equipment is designed to use tighter to the panel, and you have to access that sweet spot of atomization. Now, here's the caveat, and I'll demonstrate this in a sec. But when you're closer to the panel, you got to move a little faster, right? If you're far off the panel, you can be slow, and your structure closes up a little bit differently. When you're that tight to the panel, you got to adjust your gun speed. You got to adjust your travel speed. So here's what we're going to do now. I'm about out of water, so it's time to change the demo. So I've just shown you the basic controls of the gun, a way to set it up to where you're going to get excellent results and repeatable results. That way you can focus on technique. Does that make sense? It's super important. So there's that guy. Here's the other gun we're going to use. This is actually, this is an enormous thing. This is a 2.0 fluid tip. You can always identify the size of your fluid tip by the air cap. This one says 2.0. That's a primer gun. Most of your finish coat guns are 1.2, 1.3, 1.4. This is 2.0. This is a garden hose. So we're going to attach a gun cup with the craft paint to it. All right, so it's top fed, and we're just going to sit that right there. I'm not going to turn my booth on. I'm going to do these spray demos with the mask on. I'm going to pull the mask off. It's craft paint. It's safe. Typically, I have airflow moving in here, but it's really loud. So what I'm going to do is put the mask on. I'm going to talk to you in between. You can probably hear me a little bit with the mask on, but this is a charcoal respirator mask. We won't go into safety on paint until a different video, but I do want to talk to you about that. So the same way, I'm setting my air pressure on the inlet, and I'm setting my fan, solder is solder, so all the way to the left, and you can see you've got an indicator there, right on the handle. You see that diamond or that triangle right there? That tells you that all the way to the left, that away, that's full fan. So I know full fluid. Actually, what I can do is I can set it like this. So I'm going to set my spray gun without even air running through it. So, oh, wow. That's a little too much fluid. So the adjustment knob backed completely out of it. All right, so the knob's in place, my finger's on there. And now I'm running the fluid adjustment in. Now, see, it bumped my finger. It moved it. It moved, Jerry. So right there, it moved, and I lock it in place. Done. Fluid setup. I don't even have to have air running through it. So let's do this. All right. I'm pretty sure you can hear me. I think you probably can.
So I'm gonna do 4 inches off the panel.
This is not going to work. I'm just going to leave the mask on. But there we have, we have a lot of paint happening right there. But we have a super wet pattern. And the paint is very, very thin. But we have a super wet pattern. I'm actually going to do a little less air pressure.
All right, that was more what I wanted to see. It's a 2.0, so our droplet size is really, really, really big. But now we have a football-shaped elliptical pattern, right? That's the way the paint comes out. The fluid comes out of the center, the air does a happy dance in behind the air cap, and these air horns here, and the little pintle holes in the air cap, that's where the air comes out and transforms the round pattern into a flat or elliptical pattern. Case in point. This is full round. That's full flat. It's a big, big difference. So I'm going to put my gun back to the proper adjustment. So here's another interesting thing. Obviously, it's super wet in the middle. Here on the sides, it's dry, right? Super wet in the middle. On the sides, where the droplets are separated, it's dry already. It's flashed off already. It's dry to touch. That's a really important clue, because if I'm the wrong distance from the panel, if I'm out here 10 to 12 inches like we used to spray, look at the difference there. The pattern is enormous, but look at the spacing between the droplets. What is that going to give me? You're right. It's going to give me texture. It's going to give me orange peel. It's the dreaded orange peel in the paint job. So now we know 4 to 6 inches from the paint gun, we have a smoother texture. Farther away from the panel, we have a rougher texture. You know what's going to happen?
I'm going to paint my own booth wall. When I have classes, it's a contest that, the person that ends up getting my wall paint or the spray paint on my wall, I make fun of them for the rest of the class. So it's just one of those things. I don't want to paint my own wall because then I have to dog myself. Anyway, so now we have full round. Yeah, not the way we paint. Full flat, that looks good. Super wet in the middle, that's just because of the viscosity of the material. And the lesson here is that this is your pattern. This is your pattern, how it's supposed to look, and it's drier on the outside, drier on the inside. So we want to take advantage of from here to here. Our pattern is not from here to here. Our usable pattern is where the paint is wet. Does that make sense? And right here, okay, this is interesting too. Right here, you can see the droplet distribution. When you're too far off of the panel, you're going to have random droplets. Remember how I said with the water, the droplets were combining and creating blobs instead of atomized particulate? This is that. They're random. It looks like a vinyl texture, right? This one is the weird shape. This one's bigger. That one's bigger. Go super tight and super close in that. It's important to see. All of the difference, all of the randomness in this pattern, that's because I was outside, and when you think about that fan pattern, when you visualize what I was telling you with the water spray, we were outside of that window. It was the Wild West is what I called it. It was random. Random doesn't get you good paint results. Control gives you good paint results. Keep that in mind, right? So we've got an effective pattern here. Let's talk about overlapping. Okay, so yeah, and we were the right distance, that's the bad distance, that's the right distance. Let's talk about overlapping. Conventional wisdom, when I was taught to paint, it was a 50% overlap. I've even got videos, I've been doing this that long. I've even got videos out on the web that talk about a 50% overlap. Materials have changed, equipment has changed, times have changed, my technique has changed, and it's all improved. And now, instead of a 50% overlap on every pass, now we are moving towards a 75% over. I'm left-handed. I make no excuses for my penmanship. So a 75% overlap. So what does that mean? So one of my teaching tools is to describe spraying paint like a roofer lays shingles on a roof. You do a row, then you do a row, and it's stacked on half. Then you do a row, then you do a row, and it's row on row on row on row. Well, the same thing with spraying. We're going to do a pass, then we're going to adjust, and then we're going to do another pass, and we're going to adjust and do another pass, and adjust and do another pass, and adjust and do another pass, while we dispense our paint row upon row. That's literally the same thing. So the great analogy is to use roofing. Even if you've never laid shingles, I have. I didn't. That's why I'm not a roofer, because I hated that job. Anyway, mad respect to guys that haul shingles up and down ladders. I just figured out I didn't want to do that. I actually fell off a ladder too into a giant rose bush off a very steep pitched roof, and that kind of sealed the deal for me. Anyway, sorry, flashbacks from me as a teenager. Our 50% overlap goes like this. So here's our pass right here. Bam, we go there, 50% overlap. Our football shape is that, right? I just showed you that. That's our elliptical shape on the pattern. When we come and 50% overlap, we're getting pretty good coverage because this wet zone overlaps with that wet zone. But here's an important thing to realize and to visualize here. Our football shape tapers and it gets low. And it tapers back and it bulges out and then it gets low. So if our technique is perfect, row on row, pass on pass, we still have a low spot in the middle, right? For paints that dry super slow, sometimes they can assimilate. Technology in the past, when your pattern was this big, which is typical of a siphon-fed gun, it doesn't matter that much. With today's materials, they dry faster, they're way more expensive. And technique matters more. If every paint job was a one-coat paint job, it wouldn't matter that much. You're dealing with multiple coats, multiple layers. You want consistency. You want consistency between your rows and between coat to coat to coat. You're never going to do just one coat of any product unless it's a sealer. Multiple coats of primer, multiple coats of color, multiple coats of clear. You want to engineer and dial in your technique for consistency. So there's a reason I'm hammering on this. 50%, that's the old way to spray. Here's 75%. Now what's happening here is we'll do a pass. And 75% means we move down 25%. Over here, a 50% overlap, we spray, and we move down halfway, 50%. And we come back the other way and we spray again. And we move down halfway and we come back this way and spray again. And we have bulge and bulge and bulge and bulge. It's nuance, it's subtle, but it matters. So with the 75% overlap, we're moving down 25%, right? Because the overlap part is 75% of our pattern. So we're going to do a spray. We're going to adjust down 25%. We're going to spray back the other way. We're going to adjust, get down 75%, 25% down. Spray back the other way. 25% adjustment, 75% overlap. Spray back this way. So we're working down like this. It's a much tighter spray pattern. Why does that matter? Here's why it matters. Bulge, low spot, very, very, very low, very few low spots. It's subtle, but you're getting a much more consistent film on that panel, that vehicle, that paint job. If every paint job was a one-coat thing, I wouldn't even need to talk to you about this. It's multiple coats. So strategy matters, painting matters. We want to have a film envelope the panel. And I'm going to show you spray techniques that reflect this. I really want to hammer home on this because you have to access the sweet spot of atomization, 4 to 6 inches off the deck, and you have to increase and tighten up your overlap, 75%. Try it. You old guys, you old dogs out there say, I've been painting with 50% overlap for 30 years. Try this. I promise you, you're going to see a different result. I really hope you get a better result. The difference is this also. If I'm doing a 50% overlap and I come back this way, and then I change to a 75% overlap, I have to compensate with a little bit of travel speed adjustment. It's just part of it. That's why we're using craft paint. That's why we're using water, is because we're practicing, we're developing, we're relearning muscle memory. If you've never ever painted before, you're burning in muscle memory. It's really all that it takes. It's just a technique that you have to learn, but you have to know where to start, where to stop, how to hold the gun, and how to keep it the right distance off the panel. So that said, we've talked about pattern, we've talked about overspray, we've talked about, right here, the importance of accessing that sweet spot of even, consistent atomization, and what happens when we don't. So basically what I've just taught you is how to get a smooth paint job without orange people. A smooth paint job without orange people. A smooth paint job without orange peel. We access the sweet spot, we have consistent overlap, and we dial in our spray technique to where we don't ever have to think about that again, right? So now we're gonna paint something. So when I'm training somebody, I use a crawl, walk, run approach. Crawl, what does the gun do? What do the controls do? Water, let's do a literal demonstration what the controls do. Let's put craft paint in it and see what happens when we spray it out onto a panel. Now let's spray something that's a dimensional panel. So that's what we're gonna do now. However, I want to address an elephant in the room. Yes, it's craft paint. It's safe to use. I've still got a mask on because I'm a nerd for PPE and safety. It's important. I'm 35 years into this career, and I don't have respiratory problems because of paint. I know guys that got chased out of it because they weren't careful or because their body didn't hold up to the chemistry. So long story short, it's always better to be safe. It just is. So look at me. I got gloves on, I got safety glasses on, I got a paint mask on, I'm ready to paint, right? No, 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 no. You've seen this hundreds of times. On YouTube channels, you've seen it on TV shows, you've probably seen it in training videos, you've probably seen it in any number of ways to where guys are spraying paint with jeans and a t-shirt on. Heck, I've seen a television show on broadcast television where a guy had flip-flops, shorts, and a wife, can I call it a wife beater? I don't know. You know what I'm talking about. That's a horrible name for it because I have a wife and I don't beat her. But it's the tank top t-shirt with his mask hanging off the side of his face because he had a stogie hanging out of the other side of his face and he's spraying catalyzed clear coat. I literally saw that and I pooped and peed at the same time because it's absolutely wrong. It's the wrong way to go about this. So I want to talk about cotton. This is a cotton t-shirt. Even if you have all your skin exposed with a hoodie, put the hoodie up, put your mask on, put your glasses on. Yes, your skin is protected, but your paint job is not. Part of the reason for PPE while we're spraying is so that we don't bring contamination into the paint job and that we don't have to worry about safety and we can focus on technique. So you'll never see me with exposed skin in my spray booth. Sorry, you won't. And you're never going to see me with a cotton t-shirt on while I'm spraying. And I will always tell you it's a bad idea. So what I'm going to be spraying with is a spray jacket. Even though I'm just doing a demo, right? We set an example with PPE. This is a spray jacket and it's a lint-free material. So cotton is terrible. I'm telling you, with a slight breeze, cotton leaches off particulate more than any other fabric. Don't spray with cotton. Don't. Yeah, I know there's going to be a guy out there that's going to write in a comment saying, I've been doing it for 4 years, I get perfect paint jobs. Good for you. The 99% of the rest of us are going to have problems that we're not going to know how to diagnose. Don't wear cotton. So, spray jacket. This cost me about 30 bucks. It's got elastic sleeves, it's got a zipper, and it's got a hood. Why do we cover our head? I don't want to overspray in my hair, right? So this has got a hood, so I don't have overspray in my hair. Guess what? Guess what your hair does? By about 10,000 pieces of hair every day, it comes out of your head. Have I had hair fall down into a paint job? Sure I have. Then I learned to cover my freaking hair. So super important. So this thing, I can put a tack rag in there, a blowgun, a wipe rag, whatever. This is a piece of PPE that not only keeps the stuff contained from my t-shirt inside the jacket, it's a lint-free material. Stuff is not going to settle on there and blow down into my paint job, and it keeps the overspray off of my bare skin. Great. 30 bucks. The spray suits I use, they're about 100 bucks. They're washable, they're reusable, they actually have a fabric woven into them that's an anti-static. It's an important piece of PPE for me. It's $100. I'm not asking you to spend $100 on a paint suit. Something like this. This is a Tyvek suit, right? It's painter's overalls, right? It's got a hood. Before I started this video, I found one online. This one comes from our friends at Wally World. This is a painter's suit with a hood and a zipper. Guess what it costs? It's $8, folks. It's $8. Do it. Just do it. $8, you can probably use it even twice. I don't know. But $8, if it keeps one piece of trash from falling into your wet paint job, it's $8 well spent. The added benefits of that, keeping your skin from absorbing these chemicals and all that type of stuff, just do it, man. Just do it. So what we're gonna do is kind of do some spray demos here. And I don't want craft paint in my hair, right? I don't want to ingest it either. It's not catalyzed. It's not got a hardener in it. But I'm gonna wear my mask when I spray, because you can kind of hear me with the mask, and I'll speak slower and louder.
Am I asking you to be a PPE nerd? I kind of am. Just don't be reckless with your health. That's all I'm saying. Don't be reckless with your health. And PPE, guess what? Nothing's coming off of me that's going to land in my paint job. You're welcome. So, when we're spraying, we're going to spray on this box. Where do I start? And where do I stop? This is important. So, my training has taught me to spray from the bottom up for the most part. Why is that? We work against our airflow. And I'm going to belabor this point just a little bit, and I'm actually going to take my mask off.
Why do I go from the bottom up? Unless you have a cross-draft paint booth with air coming from one side to the other side, most paint booths are airflow comes from the top down. So if we look here, look at these filters up here. My spray booth is a semi-downdraft spray booth. My air comes in here, gets pulled in from outside into a heater unit, and comes down here, and then it exhausts over here. So the air comes in up high and exhausts over here. It's a semi-downdraft, draft meaning the breeze. It comes from up to bottom. So the reason I start from bottom to top is because if my airflow is pulling things down, if I start from the top up here and I'm working on a school bus or a minivan or an SUV, and I start up here and my airflow is coming down, the overspray that's coming off of here, because we have overspray, it's landing on the dry panel. And then when I track down, I'm having to cover up overspray. If every paint job was a one-coat paint job, it probably wouldn't matter, because the overspray is not very old. I just showed you, come back here, look at this. I just showed you seconds later, I could touch this overspray, and it's still wet in the middle. It's still wet in the middle. So the little things matter. So for paint strategy, I go bottom up, because if I go top down, even if my booth isn't forcing the air down, guess what is? Gravity. Those droplets are heavier particles, and they're going to fall down. The overspray is going to land on the dry part of the panel, and then I have to fight and cover it up. And it may not manifest on my first coat as texture, but on my 7th coat, if I've got a strategy like that with a sealer, 3 coats of color and 3 coats of clear, yeah, it might possibly show through, and it might trap solvent, and it might cause me problems down the road. So strategy matters. I know I'm belaboring on the minutia, but when I go from bottom up, it's a calculated thing. It's the paint strategy that I've been taught. Because when I track here and I'm all the way up here, that's a wet bed. When I'm all the way up here spraying, my overspray, my particulate is falling down into a wet bed and sheeting out and assimilating. So these droplets here are falling down into this wet coating, and it's becoming one instead of standing up on top of something and possibly even trapping air in between those particles, because that can happen with heavy primers, right? So I start from the bottom up, and that's why I think you should too. So that said, when I'm tracking here, manage your air hose. That's all I'm going to say. Don't spray like this. Don't do that, right? Manage your air hose. Pull it away from the panel. Push, pull. I've seen guys do this. Manage their air hose, right? I don't care what you do. One hand's for spraying, one hand's for managing your air hose. So when I'm spraying this thing, I'm going to spray from the bottom up. So here's where the spray coach comes in handy. My muscle memory is dialed in. I'm not going to be sweeping like that. I'm dialed in to where when I spray, when I track, I'm very consistent because I've done thousands of paint jobs. That's not a boast. It's just the facts. I've been in this a long time, so my muscle memory is dialed in. That's it. I still need to correct my technique sometimes. So when I'm spraying, I'm starting here, and I'm tracking up here.
Think about our football-shaped pattern. So here we are. Holy smokes.
With a football-shaped pattern, it tapers off at each end. So I want to have my 75% overlap and work my way up the panel, but where do I start on that panel? Well, the answer is very simple. You don't start with your football down at the bottom. You can see why. It's because it's narrower down there, and you're going to have light spray right here. You're going to have inconsistent coverage, right? And then when you track up, it's going to build up, but you're going to have a light spot here. So what I'm going to teach you to do is to take the middle of your pattern right there, and that's where you start on the bottom edge. So our start point on any given panel, whether it's a rocker panel or a hood or a roof or a barrel or a forklift, it doesn't matter. Our starting point is with our air horns at the bottom of the panel. Because what does that do? That guarantees me that I've got really nice distribution right there at the start of the panel instead of light dry spray right there. Does that make sense? All right, so your start point, air horns, bottom of the panel. Same way when we're starting our passes left to right or right to left, depending on how you want to spray. It's probably going to be a mixture of both. I'm not spraying right there. I'm starting 6 inches off the panel. Air moving. Spray. Why is that, Kevin? 6 inches off the panel. By the time I pull that trigger and meter that fluid in, it's very consistent when I come to here. And I spray 6 inches past the panel. And it's very consistent when I let off the trigger. It's an even blanket of wet film. You want that. You want that consistency. And that stacked on itself over and over and over again is going to give you a consistent coat. One of the arguments I've had from a couple of students over the years is that, well, aren't you wasting paint doing that? And the answer is technically no, because the paint that you're putting on is perfectly applied. When I'm wasting paint, it's because I've done the job twice because it was inconsistent. Or when I've wasted paint, it's because I've got dry spray that I have to sand and polish and then sacrifice the film thickness. So, yes, we're starting off the panel. Sure, there's overspray. Sure, there's blow-by. But call it collateral damage, right? But it's so important that we have a consistent delivery of paint on this panel that it's worth blowing a little bit out the gun to make sure that it's normalized and consistent as we come through. So, all right, so we're going to spray. I'm going to spray this part again. So we're starting here. I'm 6 inches off the panel.
My air horns are exactly lined up with the bottom, and I'm going to spray. There's no dry spray, there's no inconsistency, and the application is very, very even. It's doing crazy stuff on that tape. So here's another interesting thing. And I'm going to talk about this when we do this spray demo as well. The other interesting thing is this. Look at this, camera guy. Come up here, we got super wet film. It's nice and evenly applied. Up here, there's no overspray at all. I haven't polluted that. My technique wasn't goofy. On the sides, there's hardly any overspray at all. So what does that say? It says the paint went where I put it. I'm going to do a different demonstration. I'm going to exaggerate terrible, horrible technique. So I'm going to spray here. I'm going to start up here. I'm going to make sure and get that edge. Of course, I'm exaggerating. If my technique is sloppy, look at that. Yes, it's a gross demonstration, but look at this. It's light right there. I was careless in my application. I was sweeping my gun, and I didn't treat it like the surface. I didn't give it the respect. And look at what happened. I got overspray pollution right here. Here's the other thing. When I come back and do this, I want one coat at a time.
When the mask comes off, it's an important point I want to make. I want one coat at a time with these coatings. If I'm coming up here, sure, I've applied a coat. Oh, I'll get that dry spray on the next one. Oh yeah, so I won't compensate so much on the next one. I want one coat at a time on every panel because some of these clear coats are single coat applications. Some of them are 2 coats and you don't want to go 3 because it's such a high solids material you're going to screw up and trap solvents. So if I've gone here, my technique is garbage and it's sloppy, guess what I have right here? I already have a coat there. When I come back on here, now I've got one coat on this surface. Can you see this? I've got one coat on this surface, and now I've got 2 coats on this edge. Again, I'll say it again. There's no such thing as a one-coat paint job. You've got multiple coats in any paint strategy with any given material. So if I'm sloppy and I don't put the paint down there properly, with proper technique, with the proper start position and the proper tracking, then I'm doing a 1.5 coats on edges. It's important, guys. We want to talk about getting a perfect paint job like it exists, like the perfect golf game exists, but we want to talk about expert application. You have to pay attention to some of the details. You know the basics of the gun, you know the basics of where to put it, you know the basics of how to set it up, and to know the basics of how to spray it, the rest of it is rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. So I'm going to do another demo on this box. I'm going to start here. Air horn. It's all right just to sit here and think about it too. Don't get caught up in the fact that you have to slam this stuff on there. You can think about it. You've got time. If you apply the paint correctly, you have time to think about it and set yourself, right? You don't get a CNC mill and put a piece of aluminum in there and just turn the switch on and then guide it around. No, the tooling has to be set, the piece has to be set, the blades have to be set, and everything then goes about the application. So here we are. I'm setting my gun up. I'm 6 inches off the side. My air horns are there. So now I don't have to think about anything else. So now we're going to spray. Look at my gun. So I'm going to repeat that motion again. Actually, so right here, I'm spraying. Look at my wrist. My wrist breaks at the end of the stroke. Why is that? If it didn't, I'm doing that. That's a mistake. That's a bad technique. So my wrist breaks there. I adjust 25%. I come up. Over here, my wrist is kind of broken too. And I adjust 25%, and I come up. And my wrist is, look at my spray gun. It's perpendicular to the surface. It's the same distance off, and it's the correct technique. I'm not sweeping. I'm not arcing.
So I'm going to finish this coat. 6 inches off the panel, find my wet edge. There we go. There we go. True to form, I have not polluted the top part of this, at least not very much. There's some droplets there. So the important thing about that is that it allows me to put one coat at a time on each panel that I'm dealing with. So now, because it's a big flat box, now I can adjust myself, because guess what I can't reach down here? I can't reach that, right? It's like the top of a hood. Now I can reach that. So now I reset. And now I can track again. I start it over again. And the coat is even, it hasn't affected this coat, and it hasn't affected that coat, and it hasn't affected this coat, and it's proper application.
When you're setting your position up, I don't know how many of you guys are welders or how many have ever had training on welding. But if you haven't, go and see Ron Covell. Ron's got a great YouTube channel. He's a world-class trainer. He's done training all over the world. And when we're TIG welding, and I'll never forget this lesson because it certainly applies to painting. When you're welding, you want to do a dry run. You want to set your piece up. If you've got your feeder rod and your torch, you want to make sure that you can go all the way down the run so you don't have to stop and start in the middle. So you do a rehearsal, you do a dry run. I recommend that you do this with painting too. It makes perfect sense when you're welding because your weld can be inconsistent. If you're stretching, your torch gets farther away and you can't feed in the rod into the pool as you're traveling. So you always do a rehearsal run to make sure that you can reach everything. Painting is no different. When I'm talking about this panel right here, when I'm spraying paint, I've got a fresh air hose and I've got my air delivery hose. So there's some management that happens. When I'm teaching a class with multiple students in here, then there's a lot of management that happens, and you can become an octopus pretty dang quick. So air hose management, it matters a lot. So when I'm spraying this fender, I want to make sure that I can get to all of it. So what I'm going to start is I'm just going to do a rehearsal, right? So if I'm spraying here, because I go bottom to top, I'm spraying here, making sure I can reach. And then up here, guess what's happening now? I'm uncomfortable. I can't reach and I can't see and I can't judge my gun distance. So in my mind, I break these panels up into two parts. So I'm spraying here. The second that it starts to become uncomfortable, I stop. Now I can reset. Now I can find my wet edge. And now I can start again when I'm comfortable. And the reason I do a dry run is to figure out where to stand. Because if I start here, and now I start over here, guess what? Look at my spray gun. If I'm reaching out like that, look at the technique, it's terrible. It's gonna be awful, right? It's not consistent, and I can't even finish off the panel. So, in my dry run, I'm teaching myself where to stand. So I'll come here, up here, I'll reset, and now I know that I can start here and track and finish that coat where I'm comfortable, where I can handle my gun, where I can handle my air hose, and where I can see what I'm doing. It's really important. You have to position your body in a position that you're comfortable spraying the material. Here's another thing too, and this and so much more is contained in the Paintucation training videos. Paintucation 101, even that paint your own car, paint your own truck, the Paintucation classic stuff. This stuff is in there, and a whole lot more stuff when it comes to real paint application. I just want to let you know, if you're interested in really improving your skills and getting a deep dive into really, really great training techniques that I'm very proud of, please go and check them out online. For the purpose of this demonstration, I want to talk about this. I want to talk about an easy body position. So if I stand here in one spot with my feet together, which is kind of goofy and it just feels awkward, I can't balance very well. If I stand like this, if anybody's ever studied martial arts, your ankles are shoulder width apart and your knees are slightly bent. Why is that? Because you can bob and weave, and if you're boxing, you don't ever box with your knees locked, right? You're boxing and you're bobbing and weaving with your knees and your hips, and you're moving. So when I'm standing here and I don't do that, I've got my hips locked and my knees locked, and my body position is the same, I'm depending on my wrist, my arm, my shoulder. It's a lot of movement to keep track of, right? I can get there because I understand what it needs to look like, but I'm working really hard on that panel. Here's a big difference. If I get into a relaxed position and I set my gun, this is kind of a fun thing, watch me. I'm not moving my arm at all. I'm moving my body. I'm not moving my wrist. I'm just moving my body. Look how consistent that spray gun is. It's like it's mounted in a fixture. And now I can come over here, right? If I'm spraying like this, sure, I've got enough practice in to where I can get good technique. Here's a way to make painting easier. Easy button is hit right now. Get into a comfortable body position and spray like this. Sure, you can move a little bit, but if you use your body, you can lock your elbow, you can lock your shoulder, and all you have to do is watch that gun stay where you put it. Does that make sense? It makes sense to me, and it makes me a better technician. So you're welcome for that one. So what we're going to do now is we're going to put that into practice. We're going to exercise this painting demo. There is, and I've even been taught this in training classes. If this is a fender on a vehicle, we don't want dry spray up in this business. We don't want dry spray back here. I don't want dry spray here. I don't want dry spray here. So I've literally been in certification classes and paint training classes to where they teach you to spray here first, and spray here first, and spray up here first, and then worry about the flats. I'm telling you that that's incorrect. Here's why. If you get your jams first, here's what's going to happen. So, I've got my paint back there. I've got my paint here where it matches because I don't want dry spray there. Look what I've got up here. This is on the face side of my panel. Now I've got a coat right here on all of my edges. There's no such thing as a one-coat paint job, right? There's no such thing as a one-coat paint job. If there was, this wouldn't matter. So, what I'm doing is polluting the top surface. Now, pollution is a loose term, but I'm overcoating the top surface so that by the time I do all my jams first, get my wet edges, and yes, that's important, but if I do all of my jams first, and then I do my flats to really nail down and wet out that coat, I'm getting 1.5 coats, or 2 coats even, on all the edges. And that, my friends, is the wrong way to paint. Because when you have a sealer coat, 3 coats of color, and 2 coats of clear, you're talking about 6 coats of material. If you have 1.5 coats or 2 coats on each edge, guess what that is? That's 12 coats of material on these edges, and that, the math just doesn't freaking work. So don't do that. Here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I'm going to ask you to spray the flats first.
So what happens there? We got a super nice coat on all of it, right? So now, let's look up here. I've got a partial coat here. So let's wet that out. I've still got time, right? Now I can come back in here and I can use a half trigger and I can wet that out. And I haven't overcoated or polluted this because my directionality of my gun is important. I'm not spraying this jam like that. I'm spraying it like this. So now, guess what? Now it's dry spray. I've got a nice even coat there. And I can take a look, and if it's dry here, I can come in and dust it in, like right there, a little bit. That's all it needs.
Important, the mask is off. I am not overcoating. When I do the flat, because the flat's the most important, that's the appearance side, that's your face side of the panel. You come in and you apply the paint where necessary. If you rob yourself of that ability to apply the paint and put it where you want to put it, you're a slave to incorrect technique and overcoating on the edges. Most of the time, your runs are going to be on style lines and on edges. And if you have 7 coats right there, instead of the 2 that the TDS sheet mandates, guess what you're going to have? You're going to have more material here, and you're going to get a run, or you're going to get one of those surface bulges. And if you've painted, you know what I'm talking about. That's the reason that we do the flat first. We focus on the appearance of the panel. Then we'll come back in, wait for the overspray to get out of the room, and we'll come back in and dust and finish that coat of paint where we control it. It's so important to have control of this stuff. That's why we know where to stop, or where to start, how far off the panel. That's why we know to start spraying outside of the panel, air horns down. And we're applying like we're in a robotic fixture, because application matters. We know how the gun works, we know how to adjust it, now we know how to apply it to a square box. The proof is in the pudding. My paint technique here hasn't polluted this, so now I can do 1 coat here and focus on this and 1 coat. Does that make sense? And now, when we go to a 3-dimensional panel that actually might happen to be on a vehicle, now we can apply all of that stuff into one exercise. And if you follow these instructions, if you follow my advice, if you put into practical application the things that I'm telling you about in this little episode of this YouTube channel, I promise you, you will get better results spraying. If you decide to go into one of my Paintucation training courses, I promise you, you're going to learn more than you ever thought was possible to learn about the painting process and the why that goes behind the what. Painting in itself is a very simple exercise. It's application. It's all the other things combined, right? It's the gun distance. Why you're a certain distance off the panel, I showed you. Why you start a certain distance off the panel, I showed you. Why you could get yourself into a comfortable body position, I showed you. Why we wear PPE other than safety, I showed you. Everything is combined to have a spray painting experience. So when people tell me that paint is voodoo, paint is something that, oh, you're an artist, I say BS to all of that. It's a learned skill. It's a practiced profession, and anybody can learn it. Anybody can learn to be an expert painter on the highest level. You guys can. I've spent my life trying to train people and bringing people into this and showing them that it's a complex chain of procedure, but every link of that chain is a very simple thing to master. Right? So when you put those little lessons together, then guess what? You have control and mastery of the application. That's what I wanted to show you here. Now, we got the Camaro, we're doing all that stuff. We've got all kinds of great content coming up in 2025, but I wanted to get back to basics. My channel is Paintucation, so I wanted to educate you about paint. So I hope this helps you. If you're looking for more, I work the comments, I talk about the comments, DM me, whatever, I'll do the best I can to help you. But if you really want to take a deep dive into spray technique, body filler, primer, blocking, sanding, polishing, all those things, I've got training programs on all of that stuff. I'm not trying to hard sell you. I'm just trying to tell you that what you've learned here is contained in products that are affordable and they're easy to use and they're backed up by us. We'll stand behind them. And if you decide to buy them and you don't like it, I'll give your money back. So that's how confident I am in these training products. So I just want to close this out by saying I appreciate you guys watching. Thank you for making this channel grow into what it's growing into. And we've got a lot more stuff like this coming down the pike. You can do this. It's not voodoo. It's not magic. It's not an art form. It's a learned skill. I'm a very skilled painter. I'm very skilled. I'm very good at it. I've been in for a long time, and it doesn't take 30 years to do. I've been doing it 30 years because I got good at it real soon, and I started getting paid for it. You guys, it's not that much of a learning curve, and I want to show you that. I want to keep saying it. I want to keep encouraging you to try it. I've just given you ways to try it. Tap water, $3 craft paint, You can paint 75 cardboard boxes out of the $3 craft paint, and you can do this. But do these things for me. Pull the trigger, man. Just do it. Pull the trigger, do the work, set yourself up, make the mistakes. See what happens when you don't do what I say. See what happens when you follow my instructions. Do all of that stuff. Do it safe, be bold, just jump into it, and you're gonna find that what I'm telling you is the truth. So thank you for watching this video, and just do it, man. Don't overthink it. Pull the trigger and spray. Then you can apply the lessons. So thanks for watching. I keep saying that, but I really do appreciate it. We're gonna sign off now. Description for all the other stuff is in the links. Go catch some back episodes, and we will see you next Saturday.